Hi, I'm Jill Fry and welcome to another tutorial to help improve your photography. You would have seen in the last tutorial I took an awesome Panorama Milky Way over the little stables. Well, this time I'm going to show you how I process that shot. Now, this is probably the longest video I have ever done, but I am going to take you through everything that I do, right through from processing your shot in Lightroom, how I make my Milky Way pop with my special preset, how I do my noise reduction to get rid of all that noise in the image, how I merge all my Milky Way images to make that beautiful arch across the sky, and how I merge in Photoshop the two images of the stables and the Milky Way. So this is everything that I do. This is the hardest photo to actually achieve in terms of processing. So when you see all this, you'll know exactly how I do it. So go grab a coffee, sit back and relax and enjoy this tutorial. Okay, let's get started. This is the shot of the shed where I light painted down the side of the shed and I focused here right on the front. So you'll see my stars are a bit blurry there in the background, and I'm not worried about that because I'm going to replace that sky with my Milky Way panorama. So here's the initial shot. To save time, I'm going to show you my edit. And there it is. Now, as you can see, the sky here is really grainy and awful, but again, I'm not worried about that. What I'm interested in is making sure that my edit for the shed is right. So this is how I went about it. First thing that I do is come to this section called the lens correction section, and in here I tick remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. Now, because the Samyang isn't recognized, you actually have to go in and tell them that it's the Samyang 14mm. The next step is the important one, and this is where I do my noise reduction. So basically what I do is I set my sharpening on 50, I set my masking about 80, and I have my luminance about 20 for my night shots. Now with this masking, if you hold down the Alt key while scrolling with the masking, you can see where the program is sharpening the image. So if, for example, I scroll it way back down to the start, you'll see all of it is being sharpened in Lightroom. The more you scroll it up, the more it starts honing in on the bits that you want to sharpen. Now at about 80, you'll see here that it's really sharpening the edges of the shed, and that's what I want it to do. So that's why I have my masking on about 80 for this particular shot. Once you've done that, I go up to the top, and that's when I start playing with the sliders. I had to increase my exposure a little bit, and of course that's made the shadows look awful, but again, I'm not worried about that at this stage. So I increase the exposure and I increase the contrast just a little bit. I brought down the highlights because otherwise they were a bit blown out in this section here. I increased the shadows, and if I didn't increase the shadows, the side of the shed sort of got lost, so I had to increase the shadows to bring out this side of the shed. I upped my whites a little bit and downed my blacks. A little bit of clarity and a little bit of vibrance. And that was basically all in that section. I didn't touch any of the colours in there. I left it as it was and as it was shot. And I shot it on daylight to make sure I got the colours right in the shed. Okay, so after I did that, there was a couple of other little things that I did too. I used the graduated filter up here, and I brought the filter up from the bottom, and you can see where he's overlaid there, and I took the exposure down a little bit and the highlights down a little bit of dehaze, and decreased the saturation because it was just a little bit too bright and too colourful. Then I also had a radial filter, and I put this directly over the shed right here, and again I raised my exposure a little bit, contrast a little bit, took down the highlights a little bit, shadows up, whites up just a smidge, and the blacks down a smidge, little bit of clarity and a little bit of dehaze. And that was to just sharpen everything up on my shed to make it look really perfect. Now if I click down here, you'll see if I turn off that radial filter, that's what it looked like. So by turning it back on, you can see the differences that little radial filter made. Okay, so after I processed the shot of my shed, I then got all my sky images. And this is the first one. And you can see now that I have focused on the stars, so they are pinpoint sharp. Now, this was shot at ISO 2500, 20 seconds and f2.8. And as you can see, the resulting image is very dark because I turned off the lights on the shed, and really all I wanted out of the next series of shots was my sky. Now I changed my white balance to fluorescent in camera because I actually just prefer that colour in the sky, and it actually creates a nice contrast between the shed and the sky. So that is as it was coming out of the camera, and then I processed the shot to this. Now again, as you can see, look at all these awful shadows, and I'm not worried about that because my shed shot is going to cover that. I was purely looking at my sky and wanting to bring the best out in my sky. So again, the first thing I do is I go down to the lens correction and I click remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. And this is especially important with the Panorama because otherwise you get a bit of a whoopsie as it tries to merge the shots together. So having the enable profile corrections ticked means that your horizon should be nice and flat. Then I went up to this noise reduction detail 1, and again I put my sharpening on 50, my masking on 80, and this time my luminance, my noise reduction on 20. And I don't touch the other sliders. Now again, looking at this masking, if I click on the Alt key and I scroll up and down here, 0, everything is sharpened, and as you scroll up, gradually it starts to show and mask what you want. Now, as I wanted my stars to be nice and beautifully sharp, about 80 seems to be right. Then I go up to the top again and I start playing with the sliders. I increase the exposure a little bit. I increase my contrast. The highlights I took down. The shadows I took up, which is why it made this all awful and grainy. The whites up a little, the blacks down a little, the clarity up just a smidge, and the vibrance up just a smidge. And then what I did was I put on a radial filter for the sky. And I just wanted to darken down this little bit at the top. So you can see when I click on that, you can see the difference when it's off and when it's on. Okay, so I also did an adjustment brush and I brushed over my whole sky with a preset that I've developed called my Milky Way. And the Milky Way preset is upping the exposure a little bit, contrast a little bit. I up the highlights so I can bring out these nice juicy bits of my Milky Way. Take down the shadows so we can darken these bits. Whites up a little, blacks down a little, the clarity up a smidge, dehaze up a smidge, and a nice little bit of saturation. Not too much because you don't want to overdo it. Now the thing is with all these settings that I'm giving you, this is just the way that I do it. There's so many different ways that people process their night shots that it really comes down to personal preference as to what you do and how you do it. I'm just showing you how I do it. Okay, so now that I have my Milky Way sky looking the way that I want, I then need to ensure that all of my other shots that span the Milky Way are the same. So I come down here to where it says copy in the bottom left, click on that, make sure everything is checked, check all, copy. I then go to the first image and I click paste. Oh, and the reason why I was processing this image and not the first image is because it had more of that Milky Way core and also the zodiacal light that I wanted to capture. So I made sure that I processed this shot first. So you go back to the first image and you press paste, and it will automatically paste exactly the same settings as what was on that other shot that I processed first. And then to make sure that all the shots are the same across the Milky Way, down here I select my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shots. I've hit shift, holding down the shift key, I click on the last one which highlights them all down here. And then over here on the bottom right, I hit sync. Then hit synchronize, and all the settings from the first shot will be synchronized across the entire set. Sometimes it takes a little bit for this to happen, depending on how fast your computer is, but when they have all done the job, then it's time to merge them all into our panorama. So when that's done, you right click on those highlighted images and you go photo merge panorama. Click, and also it's creating a panorama preview. Righty ho, there we go, we have got our panorama. But look at that little funny business happening around here, around the outside. don't despair. This is where we go up to this little thing called boundary warp, and we push that up to the right. And there we have our beautiful panorama. Now don't be dismayed by these stars looking a little bit big. It is only for this illustration review. When it renders in properly, those stars will be nice and sharp. So now we go back and we click merge. And the photo merge is added to the task, and you can see up here in the top left hand corner it's saying it's creating the panorama. Okay, we're nearly done. And there we go. We will now see down in this bottom bar there is our Milky Way panorama. So we now have got our two essential shots. We've got our Milky Way panorama, and we've got the shot that we processed of the shed. So now we want to merge these two together. So holding Control on the keyboard if you've got a PC, or Command if you have a Mac, you highlight the two images that you want to merge. Then right click and go Edit in, Open as layers in Photoshop. Photoshop will start up and it will import our images into Photoshop. So when it comes into Photoshop, you'll see of course they're two different size images, and they're over here on the left in layers. Now what I normally do is I duplicate each layer just in case I need to go back. So by highlighting the first image, you hit Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. Highlighting the other image, again Control J or Command J on a Mac. And this will give us two images of each one. So I'm going to turn off the original ones, and they are there as a backup. The first thing I need to do is to get this image the right size. That's the one of the shed. So I click on that image. Now by pressing Control T or Command T on the Mac, it brings up the transform. Now I take the opacity down on the right hand side here so that I can see the image behind. And what I want to do is I now have to line that up with the shed in the background. I'm using the up and down arrow keys to try and make it be perfectly in place. Looking at these trees over here, I'm trying to get them so that they all sort of line up. This bit's a little bit of a fiddle until you feel that you've got it exactly right. Put my opacity up a little bit so I can see. Okay, I'm way off. Need to go up a little bit and across a little bit. Oops. Once you feel you've got it in the right place, you then go up to this little tick arrow and tick it and then bring your opacity back up. Now, of course, the thing is we need to merge those shots. So we come down here and create a layer mask. You click on that layer mask, thumbnail, and you press Ctrl I to invert it to make it go black. Then over here, make sure this is switched to white and make sure your brush is selected. My brush is quite big at the moment, so I might actually just bring that down a little bit. My opacity is about 50% and flow at 18%, and then I just start painting away to reveal the shed. Now I could obviously have increased my opacity a bit, but I like to do this gently, bit by bit. Now you'll hear me going click, 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 because as I go side to side, I like to release the mouse so that the action is quite smooth. And I keep on painting away until I'm happy with the result. I'll bring a bit of that post in on the left hand side. Now obviously if I go way out over here, there's nothing there because my image stops at about here. So I have to be careful that I don't just get this straight line where the image stops. Now if, for example, bring that in a little bit more, if, for example, you go, whoops, I've gone outside the lines, let's make that, oh, that looks awful, then what you do is you just switch your foreground and background colours, and then you just paste on that bit to erase it and take it back to the original one. Now you can see I've done a ghosting here by doing that, and I'll have to fix that up. So again, switching forwards and back to make sure we get the bits that we want. Nearly gone. And again, I could have used 100%, but I want to make sure it's still very soft. Okay, you'll see here on my layer mask that the white areas there are the bits that I have erased away, and the black bits are the bits that I have not. So if I clicked off on this, you'll see what I have brought in. And I could obviously make that even more so. So, oops, cancel, switch around. Let's bring a bit more of this in to make it more strong, because we really want our beautiful little shed to stand out. I'm going to just up the opacity a little bit more, save a bit of time. switch back on this layer and I'll bring it a bit more up the top here and a bit more there. You can of course zoom in by pressing the Control and plus button to make sure that you get those lines right. And you can see there I need to go in and fix up that roof line there, but just for the purposes of this video I won't bother at this stage, but again just do what I showed you before with reversing it. Okay, so Control minus takes you back out, or Command minus if you're on Mac, and you can see that my image is almost there. Okay, you can see I have a line here where when the panorama stitched, it hasn't stitched very cleanly. So I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. What you do is you click on that sky and you make another copy, which is Control J or Command J if you're on a Mac. Then Control T or Command T to free transform it and just move it slightly across. Hit the tick, OK. Then create a layer mask. Press Control I to convert it back to black. Make sure that you've got a white square up the top and your brush, and then just brush it away. I even take that opacity down a little bit more just to gently get rid of it. Done. Okay, so once you are happy with the result that you've got with your Milky Way sky and your shed beautifully merged, then it's time to go back into Lightroom. And you do that simply by going File, Save. And then this will take the image back into Lightroom. There we go, there's our image. And all we need to do now is crop it. So coming up here to our crop overlay, make sure that the padlock is unlocked and then just take up your crop to where you want it to be. And there's the final image. So I hope this tutorial has been useful for you in showing not only how I initially went about getting the shot, but how I managed to merge the shots together using both Lightroom and Photoshop. And as you can see, I do most of my work in Lightroom and then I take it into Photoshop just to do the cut and paste. So hopefully that will get you started. As I said, this is just one way of doing it, and it's the way I do it, but it's not necessarily the best way or the most perfect. But I find it works pretty well. You'll see now if we scroll into this shot, which we can do by going up here, you'll see that there's still a little bit of noise in this image. If I think it is unsatisfactory noise, then what I'll do is I'll take it into the Nick collection. So this way I right click, I go edit in, and I'll take it into define 2. Edit the copy with Lightroom adjustments and click edit. And it's preparing the file for editing. You'll see that it's automatically analysed it, and down here in this panel here, if I click on up there, you'll see the difference that it's making to that sky. So all you do is hit save and it will take the image back into Lightroom.
clicking on the screen to fit, you'll see now that most of that noise has gone, and there's my beautiful Milky Way panorama over the old stables.
So I hope that video was helpful for you, and if it was, then please give me a like, put a comment down below, and don't forget to ring that bell so you get notified when I post up the next video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later. Bye.